Recently, a fella contacted me. He had a knife that he needed a sheath made for to replace the one he had originally gotten with this knife. And he said the stitching had given out, and he wasn't comfortable with the way the sheath felt when he was wearing it. So what this fella spends a lot of time doing is riding horses. So he said he used his knife mainly to cut anything that fouled the harness or anything. When he's out in brush, he could just slice that stuff off while he's right there in the saddle. And he wanted a cross-draw sheath that would keep the knife close to his hands. And he's a right-handed guy, so it would mount over on his, just forward of his left hip, right above the pocket. And mount horizontally so it wouldn't interfere with his legs when he's up in the saddle, because you bring your legs up somewhat. So he wanted one that would ride comfortably and still securely hold the knife. So I came up with a design, and he liked it. So I made that sheath for his knife, and then when he saw this knife, he really liked it, and he ordered one, with the only difference being he wanted green canvas micarta for the handle like his original knife had. Now, his original knife was very similar in design to this, and this is a hunting knife, and it has a sweeping belly on it, and it does a good job for most cutting chores. But what he was describing to me, it put me in mind of back when I was in the Navy, and first couple of years I was on board ship, basically was a bosun's mate. And bosun's mate, we deal with line and rigging and small boats, and we do the splicing on line when it needs to be done. And just we're doing a lot of cutting and messing around with cords and lines. So the knife that I used on board ship was what I call a sheep's foot blade. More of a straight cutting edge and a drop point that comes down that makes a very strong point, like this prototype knife. And I'm really happy with this. I've done a lot of cutting. Been cutting this 6 thread, and you can really bear down on this knife. And that straight cutting edge stays engaged to your work. You don't have to change the angle of your hand like you would with a curved blade. To keep that engaged in the work as you're pulling, you have to raise your hand and keep the point engaged. But that's what this knife was designed for. So this knife is designed for more heavy cutting. I put serrations back here on the spine to allow you to get your thumb on there, and it's not going to slip, as well as your index finger if you're using the knife in this fashion. But it's really not about the knife. What it is about are these rivets that I'm going to have to use, because I want a cross-draw sheath, but I want to build it with the ability to vertically mount over on your hip if you wanted to wear it that way. So it's going to serve a dual purpose, but I'm not going to be stitching the sheath at the attachment points for the belt loop, and you'll see all that when I'm in the shop making the sheath in the next video. But what I want to do is make a couple of tools. I ordered a bunch of these copper rivets. It has a solid post. There's the head on it, and they come with these little copper washers, and they call these burrs. So the end of this post is tapered, so the idea is you'll get that pushed up through the holes that you punched, and that'll sit on the taper and stop. And then it has to be driven down onto your leather, and that'll stay where you drive it to. It won't come loose while you get ready to set the head. So after you have gotten that where you want it, you'll nip the head, leaving a little bit protruding, and then that part is peened over to lock that burr into place. And they make tools to do that, both to drive this down onto the post, and then another tool to actually dome the burr after you've nipped it. And I could have ordered those when I ordered these rivets. And I got to thinking, I've got just a mile of this 01 drill rod in 1/2 inch diameter. And I've had it for a long time, and it's just a go-to steel when I want to make a tool for the shop. So I decided I'm going to make these tools. It's be a simple little lathe project, and we'll be heat treating them, since we want them to be durable and not deform as we strike them. So that's the subject of the video, and I thought it would be fun to make them here and then show you guys the process. So it'll be little condensed cuts of over there on the lathe and the drilling. We're going to be tapering the ends a little bit and knurling, and then we'll be heat treating these. And then the next video, I'll be actually using them to construct this prototype sheath for this prototype knife. And we'll see what you think about that. But I think it'll be fun to show you guys, and it'll give me something to do that doesn't involve grinding and doing all the knife stuff that I normally do in this shop. So see you over at the lathe. Alright, I've got a couple feet of this '01 stock chucked up in here, and I went ahead and faced it, and I center drilled it. Now the post on the rivets measures 135 thousandths or so, 134, and I'm using a 9/64 bit, going to go in about about an inch deep, just to give myself plenty of clearance should I use longer rivets. So we're going to go in about 1 inch with this bit. So I blew that hole out, and this is the rivet here. So I'm just going to do a little test fit. It goes all the way into the head, and you have to think that most of this length is going to be taken up by leather itself on the sheets I'm going to be making. So I think my depth of the hole is going to be good enough. Now I'm going to turn that down. I'm going to start a taper right there. I have to pull some more work out. But I'm going to start that taper. I wanted the end of the taper to be just a little bit smaller than the head of that rivet. So I'm going to go measure the burr, actually, is what I want to match. And I'll start a taper, probably 30 degrees or so. And just the small end of the taper will be about the size of that burr. Just a little bit smaller so I don't make any impression in the leather. Okay, I've set these calipers to be just a little shy of the diameter of the burr. So I'm going to taper this at 15 degrees aside until the end of it is that size, and wherever the taper ends up out here, that's fine. It shouldn't take very long to get there. I've got the little taper finished. It didn't take but about a minute and a half. So now I'm getting ready to knurl, and I'm just putting a very fine knurl on this, just enough to help me hold it, and went ahead and laid out the length of the knurl where you see that little shaded area down to about where we're starting, and I take a cutoff tool and I marked the overall length, and all I did was I matched the length of this center punch just as a comfortable tool size. So I'm going to be using a squirt can with the cutting oil and just putting this on power feed till I get here, and then I'm just going to reverse the thing, and it shouldn't take very long at all. I've got the knurl done. It turned out pretty nice. It's dark now because I had Sharpie on all of this, but we'll clean it up with a brass wire brush here. I'll give you guys a look at it. All I'm going to do now is take this turning tool. I'm going to reduce the diameter up to the knurl so I have a nice little chamfer and a clean start on my knurl. Then I'm going to come back to the end and come this way a little bit and do the same thing. No given dimension, just to clean everything up. Get a pretty nice finish with this high-speed steel turning tool. Like I said, it just has a nice radius on the end, and I use it when I need a smooth finish, and I just plunged in with it to get a little bit of a bevel. I'm going to part it off back here, but then as this head, not that I expect it to mushroom too much because I'm using it on copper and leather, but if I do, I can just dress it and it won't spill over into the shank of the tool. So I'm getting ready to take this thing out of here, and we'll look at it over on the bench. I'm just going to have to cut it off after I'm done with everything. Alright, I got the first one ready for heat treatment. Just dressed off the end after I parted it off with some 220 on the belt grinder. And it's ready to go. The knurl turned out really nice. And, you know, I can remember a time when I would have had to order something like this from a supplier before I had the machine shop that I have now and the knowledge. But, you know, making this was a whole lot more fun than just simply opening a box would have been. And though it wouldn't have been that expensive, I think the one I'm making is a better looking and better built tool than some of the stuff you can get from some of these suppliers where it's just plated and straight. And, you know, this is fun. And, you know, this is why we have hobby machine shops, isn't it? So anyway, guys, I'll come back on the next one when I've got it down to this point. And I'm just going to be doming the end of that with a ball end mill to make a little bit of a forming tool for the end of this when we nip it off. So I will see you in the next video, and thanks for joining me, and I'll see you later.